Adam and the Ants were a relatively short-lived English new wave band fronted by a guy called Adam Ants, that was his stage name, who went on after them to have an extensive solo career as well. So they were formed in 1977 as the Ants. So Adam was in a pub rock band called Bazooka Joe, who headlined a rather infamous gig at St Martin's College in London, which was where the Sex Pistols played their first gig. Now, I assume this is the same gig that other people have talked about in other settings. The audience wasn't huge, but the number of people who were in the audience who were then inspired to start their own bands was impressive. Adam was already in a band, but as the other members in the band weren't impressed with the Sex Pistols, he left Bazooka Joe and formed the Ants. They had some small level success, and they were kind of making a bit of waves in the punk scene, and a few changes of members, and had a first album. And then in 1980, Malcolm McLaren, who was the manager of the Sex Pistols and an impresario, was he was kind of like the puppet master for the punk scene to quite a large extent. And he stole Adam Ant's band from behind him to form a band called Bow Wow Wow, fronted by a girl called Arabella Quinn. He scrabbled around and found some new members, and it might have been the best thing that happened to him and the Ants, because they ended up with two drummers, and he ended up with a long-time songwriting partner, Marco Pironi, and made a change to their sound. I think this was the point where they changed their image as well, and they became mega successful for the next few years. They released two more albums and then split in 1982, and then Adam went on to his solo career that I've already mentioned. Hi, my name's Dan, and this is a review of the album Kings of the Wild Frontier by Adam and the Ants. It was their second album. It was released in 1980. It was the first album with his new band, having had to replace them because they'd been stolen from behind him by Malcolm McLaren. It's my first time listening to the album as a whole, but I've heard several other tracks before. I've seen copies of this around basically ever since it came out. It was obviously a very popular album. They were huge at this point, and this album was partly what propelled them into this hugeness. In the UK, this album was the best-selling album of 1981 in the whole of the UK. Both Acclaimed Music and Wikipedia apply the genre whole of new wave for this. I think that doesn't really give you a good idea of the music's like. I think it's just because they were in that kind of scene which was emerging out of the punk scene, and they were themselves emerging out of the punk scene effectively. So I'm going to talk about, I very rarely do this for a band and talk about the visual image, but it was really important for their success. So they had this visual image where they dressed up, and they've got a mix of Native American and pirate stuff going on. Adam Ant immediately stuck out visually with his white stripe across his face and his intense and quite energetic look and approach. And the fact that he was considered to be quite good looking. And it was all energy and camp and dressing up. And some people say that this was heralding in the musical style or the musical movement, the new romantics. Okay. It was a return in quite a lot of ways to a more fantastical and flamboyant way of doing things after the more grounded ideas that punk had, and to some extent, punk in some ways was a reaction against things that were more fantastical and more glamorous, like glam rock and prog rock and stuff like that. So this was kind of a return to that. The sound is totally unique, I would say. There's never been another band quite like them. Part of this is, or a strong part of this is having two drummers and playing the same thing, giving it a lot of oomph and a lot of kind of the strength of the backing. Now, apparently, the drumming style is Burundi style, so Burundi is an African country. And I don't know if they actually played tribal or African drums. Mostly it was playing drums rather than cymbals. It doesn't sound like a drum kit. Lots of the focus is on the rhythms that they've got here, which are quite uh, quite bombastic rhythm stuff going on. Jangly guitars, mostly, and I would say mostly guitars rather than keyboards here, with an approach that reminds me of glam rock from the early 70s. I had that thought as I was having the first listen to the album. I'd never really had connected that thought or had that thought about Adam and the Ants before, but I've never really listened to well, I haven't listened to the whole album of theirs before. And I was kind of going, there's a real feeling of uh, glam here. And after having had that thought when I was doing my reading, I felt vindicated that other people had had the same thought as well. I always feel like I've maybe got something right if other people say the same thing as me. Obviously, they're not copying me, but I'm not copying them because I came up with it independently. Vocals, we got Adamant strident, energetic vocals with some interesting vocal ornamentation that sounds a bit like punk. In some ways, and this thought's just popped into my head, it's a bit like punk ornamentation for female punk singers, in that it's got these jumps up and down that seem to be done more by the girls in punk. But also, just the whole ornamentation, the way he approaches it, is quite unique. It's very adamant. And then we've got backing vocals, which kind of emphasize part of the feel. It's got quite chanty, which adds to this kind of pirate feel and this kind of almost tribal feel to the whole thing. And everything's delivered as a strong and bombastic, I'm using that word again, fantasy. Very much a music with a fantasy image going behind it. The lyrics are curious and interesting. I don't think they're particularly deep, but again, they're mostly kind of pulling into various types of fantasy, things like Kings of the Wild Frontier, ant music. It's got this kind of feeling of there's a tribe of ant people that they're trying to describe, but they're also painting fantastical pictures and calling fans to join the tribe. Effectively, it's about building a feeling of belonging, I think, in the people who are going to follow this music and be enthusiastic about it. The whole thing's quite infectious. I enjoyed it a lot. Um, uh, I was of an age when this was kind of so early, 1980. I was mid-teens, slap on here, and some of my peers were a little bit old. Some of them loved them. Some of them sneered at them, partly because I think it felt poppy, and it is poppy, and because of the strong reliance on image to make the success here. At the time, I was always undecided. Now, it's not on this album, but Stand and Deliver has always been my favourite Adam and the Ants track. I think that's on the next album. Now, I would say I'm a mild fan of Adam and the Ants because I did really enjoy this album. So that's what I think. I'd love to know what you think of the album. This album is really the kind of thing where there will be some people still who sneer at this because of the image and the poppiness of it. And there will be other people for whom there's a huge nostalgia to this album. If you're one of either of those, I'd love to hear from you, what your memories are, what your thoughts are, what you think of Adam and of Adam and the Ants. And anything you want to say about the review, I'm quite happy to hear that as well. So, but that's it from me for now.
A new royal family of wild nobility. We are the family. A new royal family of wild nobility. We are the family. We are